Hey folks, welcome to Retro Rise podcast number 1. There'll be a little bit of intro on each one of these things. So, for the example, this week I will tell you all about what's going on, which is just me talking about Retro Ride podcast, the forum in general, answering questions from the thread that we put up a little while ago. And then we will play a little bit of music and then the podcast starts. This is the first time we're doing this. I thought I'd open with myself, simply because there's questions floating about and I can check out any technical problems we have and all of that kind of stuff without involving other people and wasting other people's time. The thread I put up in November is still relatively relevant. I did actually record a complete podcast, but the sound quality was abysmal. So technical problems aside, we are back. We have taken advantage of the January sales and bought ourselves some new electronical equipment for which to record stuffs. I'm going to open with the question which I plan to open pretty much every podcast with, which is why cars? For me, cars are kind of ingrained into my upbringing. My dad was a bit of a car nut, to say the least. I think at one point we had 6 or 7 cars in various states of repair. I think one of them was working, and had everything from hot minis to Rover P4s, Wolseley's. There was a Ford Pop in the garage for as long as I can remember that was gifted to us from a neighbour, and all sorts of other things. Mazda 323 GT in the early 90s, which was a sort of not quite cult classic at that point, but it was an odd choice of car to have, but it was damn cool. And yeah, constantly surrounded by effectively Bangonomics type cars. The things like the Rover P4 and Wolseley 1660 were daily drivers. They took us on holiday. The Wolseley 1660 is the only car that took us from London to Carmarthen in Wales on holiday without having to stop because it was so comfortable. No one needed to get out. It was just brilliant. And that used to take me to school, and people at my school used to think it was a Rolls Royce. So this was like late 80s, mid 90s, or late 80s to mid 90s that I remember these. And then on top of that, during the same sort of period, my dad would take us out most weekends to motor racing events. So Brands Hatch wasn't too far from our house. So just whatever was going on there. So club racing, classic car racing, saw Group C GTs in their prime. We saw touring cars. Saw all sorts of stuff. Then we'd go down to Liddon Hill and occasionally see what was going on there. We went to Pembrey when we were holidaying in Wales. I think we went to Thruxton at some point to see Thunder Saloons. Used to go and watch Jerry Marshall racing in whatever he was racing in, to be honest with you. My dad was a massive fan of his, having seen him racing at Crystal Palace in the 60s. So yeah, my entire upbringing was kind of car stuff. And then on top of that, in the house was classic car magazines of all sorts of practical classics, classic and sports car. But alongside those was Street Machine and Custom Car Magazine. And alongside that was car and car conversions. So I had this kind of really weird melting pot of influences. VWs played a big part. My dad had a number of Beetles. So Volkswagen used to float around our house. And all of these things kind of led into me just really enjoying cars, and a really odd range of them as well. So that's kind of where the whole Retro Ride ethos comes from, is that mix of just anything goes as long as it's interesting. But obviously a little bit older. We do like our cars a little bit older. Then eventually I got my first car, and it was all downhill from there, really, pretty much. I think the first car I actually that was mine in inverted commas. So I think my dad gifted me one of his things that was kind of working, which was a red 1 litre Metro. And I learned an important lesson in that is that the sound of your car apparently to other people can indicate that you have a racing car, when in fact you just have a hole in your exhaust. So the general public don't really know anything about cars, because I would constantly get boy racers trying to have a go at lights, and I just had a hole in the exhaust of my 1 litre Metro. So they always beat me, mainly because I couldn't race them. And then I had the Sierra, which was the most god-awful car of all time ever. Tried to kill me on a number of occasions. And then I got my Alfa Romeo, which was the first car I bought for myself, which was an Alpha 33 1.7 Cloverleaf, which I immensely regret not still having, but such is life. So yeah, that's kind of why cars is that upbringing, and then once I was able to have them myself, I found that I was as entertained by them as my dad was. He I think approached more from a engineering interest point of view, and I was very much I just liked cars. I don't know why. I think the freedom they give you is great, and the sort of expression of who you are you get from cars is also counts for something, because whenever you spend that much on a thing, or that little, depending on who you are, it says something about you, both your approach to that kind of equation, as in, do I want to go for just spend almost nothing on my car, or do I want to spend big and represent myself in that way, and then the choice of car and stuff like that even if you're not interested in cars, I think it says something about you. But if you are interested in cars, if you are a car guy or car girl, then yeah, it's super interesting, and then what you do with it afterwards is even more interesting to me. So yeah, that's cars. I like them, so that's why cars. Let's get onto this thread here, and see if we can find some gems. So Merc Dan 68 asked me, did you think the forum would be such a success? In all honesty, no. Because I didn't think anything of the forum, really. I started it off the back of an odd set of circumstances. So I was involved with VWs, I guess. I had VWs. I had a camper van, 1972 bay window camper van, which I was using as a daily driver and gradually driving into the ground because of lack of repairs. And my wife had a 66 Beetle, with twin Webers and all that shenanigans, and it was a quick little car, that thing. And over time, I'm sort of fairly involved with VW stuff. I was posting on VoltZone, and I used to go to Volksworld Show and all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed the scene. It was good fun, but I found that my interest in cars was slightly broader than just Volkswagens. And then I'd post up things on VoltZone that weren't VW based, and you know they weren't ridiculed or anything, but it was the same sort of 4 or 5 people that would reply to those posts with more interesting information. And then at some point, Retro Cars magazine came out, 2004, I think. Must have been February 2004, and then I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing, that like being interested in this stuff is a thing. And then around that time, I was DJing in Swansea, sort of semi-irregularly. I think once a month at least, if not twice a month. And then my spare time was spent, record hunting, listening to record, practicing, all that sort of stuff. And I've been doing this for a while. I mean, I've been DJing for years, and the problem with the music scene is it's horrible. And we were running our own night. I was involved with some guys that were running their own night, and somewhere along the line, I basically ended up in what my friend described, because he was with me at the time, as a fracas with one of them, over a misunderstanding about an equipment failure when we were just starting to DJ, and he walked off, and I went to grab him to bring him back, and he punched me in the face. And that is what it is. But then afterwards, I was like, I don't need to be around drunk, aggressive people anymore, and staying out till 4 a.m. to tidy up all my equipment after doing a gig to then go to work on the next day. So I thought, I'm gonna stop doing this. But then I found myself with a bunch of spare time and burgeoning interest in things old cars, and I built websites for a living, and I knew how all of this stuff kind of worked. So I put together a website, which was Retro Ride, which got named by I'm going to say lady, from Voltzone, because they owned the domain, but we couldn't transfer it or something. Something happened anyway, but Retro Ride ended up being its name. And I set up the forum, and I invited a handful of people along to say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. Come and talk to me about stuff here, rather than fill up this Volkswagen forum with our pictures of Datsuns. We can talk about it over here and stop annoying these folk. And that's kind of where it all started, and that's it. I think the watershed moment for us was we were gradually getting the name out there. I mean, when I say getting the name out there, I think we had like 200 people on the site, and we went to, or at least 200 registered users, and then we went to the first Retro Cars show, and we took along with us 500 of these flyers that just had the URL on them, just the full length, no other information really, and the 6 people on our club stand, I handed them out to a bunch of them and said, right, any cool cars you see, slip one of these under their windscreen. Because we had no idea what to expect. Like, the magazine had been out for a while. It had been 6 months old at this point, I think. But this was the first event that we were going to, and we had 6 cars on our stand, and we were quite near the entrance, and we were standing there, and all of us kind of got to the stand and just stayed there really for a little while, just getting to know each other, because it was the first time I'd met most of these people. And because we were near the entrance, we got to see the cars coming in. And I remember Ahmad, who is Simon, if I refer to Simon, I'm usually referring to Ahmad, saying, where did these cars go before this show? Because they were all there. There were like Mitsubishi Shipporos that were lowered. There were engine swapped Hillman Avengers and all this random stuff that were turning up, like Morris Minors with Z-Techs and things like this, that just, I don't know, like where they went. I think at one point Simon went and grabbed a chap that came in, and just, he liked his car so much he wanted him on the stand. I think it was an Austin A40 of some description. I think it was like a cafe racer style, in fact, which would be very popular now. And he liked it so much before he went into the car park, he went, no, come on our stand. So we got that on our stand. But we were talking to that guy as well, and it was just like, it's this odd scene that kind of existed around the fringes of other scenes. And that when we put out those flyers, and at that show, I thought, oh, okay, there really is something here. Maybe this forum can be a thing, can be a focal point for all this stuff. And it sort of turned out that it has, which was semi-accidental at first, but I mean, I kind of help manage communities for a living. I build websites for a living. I kind of do this stuff full time now. So whatever it is, 12 years later, I'm probably relatively knowledgeable about this stuff. I wouldn't say necessarily good, but I'm knowledgeable about this stuff. So if I'd known then what I know now, yeah, I would have said it was going to be a success. But back then, no clue, no idea. I was happy just to have some people to talk to about just cars that no one else liked. So that was a brief answer. So next we got Penske, who wants to know what the biggest animal I could take in a fight is. It's a horse. I'd just kick it in the shins. They go down. Just easy. Johnny Bravo. Name and shame the kitchen fitter we have pissed off and who finds it imperative to advertise his wares on here. I have absolutely no idea where those people came from or what they're playing at. So I always thought that what they were doing was spamming. You then get links in the spam and that ups your Google ranking because multiple reasonable websites link to your site. And I thought that's kind of what but they don't have a phone number on there. So for a start, who advertises with a phone number anymore? Everyone advertises with a website. And second, what do they think is going to happen? That people are going to come on to the Retro Roads forum and go, ooh, I need a kitchen fitter in Merseyside. I'll ring this random number that I found on this car forum. It's very strange. We're not the only place they do it. They're all over the shop. So, yeah, they're an interesting lot. I wish they'd stop. It's quite annoying, but it doesn't take long to get rid of it, and everyone knows now. Just report it. We'll bin it off at some point. Battles. Which of the following makes you groan the loudest when you see a thread about them? Stretched tyres, chopped springs, reusing bolts, hub-centric wheels, and BIVA/8-point rule. Interestingly, most of them don't make me groan. Like the threads themselves don't make me groan. Sometimes the people replying might make me groan because I think, before I've even opened it, I think, oh God, I know where this is going. And it's different people for different types of threads as well. The stretched tyres, we recently had, when I originally recorded this, I actually answered this question, and we had a stretched tyre thread at the time that was going very well. I was very pleased with it. It was full of sort of reasonable technical information, and then in the interim period, it went to hell in a handbasket. But actually, I tidied it back up again because I thought it was too useful a thread to bin. So that was kind of the perfect example because it, for me, before, because it was, this is my question, which is a technical question about MOTs and stretch tyres and the exact state of affairs. It wasn't, does this look good? It wasn't, is this safe? Do you think? Yada, yada, yada. It was, what is the current technical state of affairs with this? And that's great for me because I want technical answers. I don't want to know if you don't think they look good. I don't want to know if you don't think they look safe. I want to know what the rules are so that people can be informed when they're making their decision. Now, here's an interesting thing, which is possibly a bit more controversial. If people find out that their stretched tyres that they're running are outside of the realms of whatever criteria there are for stretched tyres, and they choose to run them still, that is up to them. If they have made the informed choice to do something illegal, bear with me on this, then that is their risk to run. Now, people will then go, oh, but you're putting me at risk. You're putting other people at risk. You're putting nuns and kittens at risk. Yes, they are. But at the same time, every time you drive over the speed limit, you are doing the exact same thing. It was an informed decision because you know that this road is a 70 mile an hour limit and you're doing 85 on it. And then you're tell your friend about how quick you managed to get to their house or whatever. You made that choice. If you crash at 85 miles an hour and you kill a bus stop full of nuns and kittens, you are just as bad as someone that has stretched the tyres on their cars, has a blowout and drives into a bus stop full of nuns and kittens. And people will get on their high horse about this, but they are wrong. So, what I want is people to make informed choices. Now, the interesting thing with stretched tyres is there is a really heavy grey area, or there has been a really heavy grey area. In fact, I don't think the rules currently, as they state, even with their nice little diagram, take that grey area away. Because stretched tyres are now in the MOT. And the ruling is that you shouldn't be able to see the bead that is seated in the little bead well thing on a tyre. I'm sure it has a technical name. You'll soon get used to the fact that I don't know any technical terms for anything. So, once you've got that rule in place, you can then work with it and you can look at your tyres and go, are they outside this rule? But the diagram itself, like one of the tyres was like fully, almost balloon-like on the wheel, all of the bead in. And then the other example was it like just completely stretched, like beyond what I would think like it was what I would refer to as Japanese show stretch. It's the stretch that they put on their ridiculous cars because it's ridiculous, and everyone knows that that's not the car they would take to the shops. And fairly often it seems to be the car that they just roll off the back of their pickup and drive around the show area. So I still think there's that grey area, but I don't groan when I see a stretch tyre thing. The thing that bothers me is someone coming to the thread and saying, I don't like them. I don't care if you don't like them. Like, you're possibly correct not to like them as far as you're concerned. There's loads of things I don't like, but as soon as they pop up in threads, I don't reply to them saying, I don't like this thing. I think this thing is dangerous. There's loads of stuff that I think is dangerous. The amount of engine swaps I see where people don't upgrade their brakes, that's really dangerous. Like, you've made your car heavier, usually, with an engine swap, and you've made your car more powerful, and you've not upgraded your brakes, and you're driving it around. That is every bit as dangerous to me as running very stretched tyres. But no one seems to complain about that because it's an engineering thing. Nonsense. So anyway, yes, the threads themselves don't bother me. It's more the replies. So I would groan occasionally when I see replies. Or replies that I know what that person's opinion is of those things. It's like, you've stated this before, you don't need to state it in every single thread. Chop springs, we put that one to bed, to be honest with you, I think, a while ago. Reusing bolts, I have no recollection of any reusing bolts problem. Same with the hub-centric stuff. I think they're one of those things that if you can... The hub-centric wheels are one of those things that can be correctly engineered or under-engineered, and they get a bad rep for being engineered. A bit like, banded steels were a few years ago, when everyone was like, banded steels are illegal, and then we were like, no, they're not. We will find out the exact information about this, and we did. The BIVA 8-point rule stuff I actually look forward to, because what we're finding over time is it's not as scary for us, at least, as it first appears. And yes, it's an expense, but more and more of our sort of cars that have ended up in that situation are getting through okay. I suspect we're going to see more and more over time as well. The DVLA or VOSA or whatever they're called this week seem to be checking out forums, and our forum is quite large, and they will pull stuff in, or they will release research stuff to see what's going on. I know a few car builders that have not put build threads up or pictures of their builds up in order to avoid potential issues with these things. I know a few people that have been, I guess, shopped is probably the right word. Probably most famously is Andy with Red Victor, who apparently got, because it's supposed to be street legal, somebody else within his area, within his scene, decided to shop him and say, well, this is supposed to be street legal, so it should be IVA'd. And it was, and it passed. So I'm kind of the opinion, if that can pass, most things can pass. I think it gets a bit more troublesome for hot rod people because of the age of the cars and some of the things that they have to pass that they were never designed to. Whereas a lot of our stuff is that little bit later, so we can pass a lot of things, or we can make things that will pass for the test, which is really what you need to get through. But yeah, the problem we have actually, as opposed to the hot rod guys can run off their chassis, whereas we're monocoque. So as soon as you chop into your monocoque, you basically need to BIVA your car theoretically, because you the way the rules are set up, that's how it works. So if I was to target top my Datsun for whatever reason, because I was going back to the 90s, that would necessitate me taking it down to get. I could do nothing else to it, but that would necessitate it. So it would pass. It's just it's a relatively, in my brain, it's a relatively minor change in order for it to then go through that kind of extensive test. But it's an extra 500 odd pound on top of your build, which for some of us working on a budget, you have to take into account. But for some of the bigger builds, £500 is you can build that into your budget. If you're spending sort of 5-6 grand building your car, another £500 is a pain in the arse. But at the same time, it's a year's insurance, depending on what sort of crazy modifications you've done and who you're insuring it with. So I'm not too the BIVA stuff. I'm usually interested to see, and I'm hoping to see more and more people passing it and sharing their experiences of passing it and what happened and how it all worked. I followed a couple of questions after this about the podcast. My guess is if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, these have been answered. And then we have MD. So MD wants to know whether his crap 10-year-old car is retro. No, probably not. I'm not a massive believer in the gradual movement of the age of retro stuff. It's kind of going to happen very slowly, but I think the problem we've always been quite interested in modern cars as well, but that's from an inspiration point of view. If you want to look at what's happening in the modified world, you should look at everything. So you should see what Hot Rods are doing, but you should also see what I guess is now called Stance is doing, or what the Euro Look guys were doing way back when we started, and all that cleaned stuff that came along that sort of predated the Stance stuff. That was all super interesting. And you could take inspiration from that and apply it to your 1978 Ford of whatever ilk you have, and it would be awesome. So, I was. That's kind of where it all gets a little bit muddy. But yeah, your crap 10-year-old car is probably not retro, and if you modify it, it might be interesting. So I still want to see it. He's having problems trying to get wet grass to burn. My advice with wet grass is to make it sure it's really wet, like make sure it's been rained on for like 3 days solid, and then it's probably likely to burst into flames. What sort of weather have we arranged for Retro Road Gathering 16? It being a bank holiday weekend in August, it's going to be sunny all weekend because they're never wet, so it's going to be fine. He then asked a question that only a doctor can answer, but that's all he's got, so they were rubbish. Stony Ray's tummy feels funny. Is that my doing? Yes, the sound of my voice is liable to cause funny feelings inside you. Probably boredom, because I have a terrible monotone, which is not ideal for doing podcasts. But hey, you're stuck with it, and so am I. In a pitched battle between MGB, Triumph Flat Cap Pipe Smokers versus the baseball hat on backwards JDM Tight Dubscene Chop Springs and Stretched Tyres crew, who would win? I'm going to say I think the MGB Triumph Flat Cap Pipe Smokers would win because they're full of anger, and the baseball hat JDM Tight Dubscene Chop Springs and Stretched Tyres crew are too busy vaping and standing by their cars and Instagramming to take notice and realise that they're about to be attacked by the MGB Flat Cap Brigade, full of their anger at things that they don't like or understand, or things that aren't what they would do. But they're both all right. I think the weird thing about where we all sit is somewhere in between those two, and what I find is they're both generally all right. They seem nice enough. Car enthusiasts are car enthusiasts as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't matter really what you want to do. So I like them. But yeah, watch out for those angry old men. They're angry. 1430 Mark 1. Sorry, that was Stony Ray on the previous question, by the way. 1430 Mark 1. A brief lowdown of my retro car ownership history. I kind of touched on it a little bit. So I had the Metro with a hole in the exhaust. Had the Sierra 1.6, 1.8. And it's brown. And it was invisible to police cars, which is very useful when you're 19. It for some reason I never got pulled over in that, but I always got pulled over in my Metro for reasons unknown. Then I got my Alpha 33, which was the first car I bought for myself, and that got driven into by a bin lorry, and then got a dent on the other wing where I kicked it out of anger that it had been driven into by a bin lorry. And it had another dent. Someone else drove into it at some point, like completely out of my view. So there was no insurance I could do, and that ended up getting written off because it was worth nothing at the time, and I really wish it hadn't been. Then I had a Peugeot 309, which was sort of semi-retro at the time, I guess. And that was a real workhorse. I drove that through a flood in the Gower, and the water was up over the bottom of the windows, and it still kept on going. It was an incredible little thing. But after the flood incident, actually, it developed a fault with the carburettor, which at the time I couldn't find another matching carburettor because Peugeot for some reason decided to change the carburettors every 6 months or something. If I'd known then what I know now, then I'd have done something else. But as it was, it kind of ended up just running really rough for a while, and then I got rid of that, and it got replaced with a Mark III Golf, which certainly wasn't retro, which is actually what I owned when I started the forum. But I also owned a VW camper van at the time, which was up until the Golf came along. So the Peugeot was out of action. I had to use the camper van as a daily driver. So yeah, my camper van was a daily driver for a good year and a half or so. I gradually drove that into the ground, poor thing. It was a crossover bay as well, so it was a real pain in the ass to work on. Crossover bay has like weird access problems because the engine's a funny shape for the year, because it has the previous year's shell with the next year's engine, and the next year's engine wants to be tackled from the top. And the following year they put a hatch in the top of the engine bay so you could lift it up and work on it. But the year I had it, you couldn't do that. So, but it looked nicer because it had the lower bumpers and and all that good stuff. So, yeah, 72 crossover bay was possibly not a great choice for me, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then that went and lived with my dad, who I basically gave it to. In fact, no, not basically, I did. I gave it to. I drove it down the M4 in a rather dangerous manner, because it ended up doing, I think, 20 miles an hour up the hill past the Severn Bridge, because it was running on 2.5 cylinders, and every time I put the brakes on, it would lurch to the right, because one of the brakes was sticking. But that went to my dad. My dad fixed it all up, did some welding, reconditioned the engine, made it lovely, and sold it to a chap. I think he lives in Devon nowadays. It's still on the roads. And then I had the Golf for a fair while, with the promise not to buy anything stupid, because I had no money as well. And then along came my little Datsun, which I now own and have had for a long time. So that's kind of it at that point. I wish I had more money and I wish I had more space, but I don't. So if I did, I'd have more cars, because I keep on getting offered ridiculous things. But I'm very happy with my number of cars at the moment. And I think, actually, having gone through these questions before, there is a question later where I explain why I'm happy with that. Seth, those that know me will be aware that I'm a keen follower of the latest trends in all walks of life. Seth is a very, very fashionable man. Have you got any idea what the next automotive big thing will be next year, which will be this year now, 2016, so that I can make sure I stay ahead of the game? Okay, so I think on the wider scene, all of the stancy lot, wide arches, all that wide body kit stuff, that's going to be big, because I've noticed a lot more stuff referencing, well, next year we need to wide arch this car, next year we need to wide arch your car. Like that, it's just become a phrase, and it's kind of off the back of the Liberty walk stuff, and all the bolt-on arches there. I also think there's going to be a reasonable amount of race-inspired stuff. I think that there's going to be a transition from some of the stancy stuff towards wide arch, but then also some of the stancy stuff towards a much more functional, racy stance. Obviously, Mike, who I hope to have on the podcast at some point, has resurrected Rusty as an all-out race vehicle, and he kind of is a good weather vane of what's going through people's brains. And I noticed that on a lot of the what I guess people would call scene, but I guess would be stance, Instagram accounts and websites and stuff, more and more kind of cool looking race cars are appearing. So I think that's a big thing. Then there's the whole cafe racer thing that I kind of pointed out, I guess, earlier this year, but I'd noticed for a little while. I think that's going to carry on, just quietly in the background, but it's a bit like the Petrolicious type stuff. It's a little bit cafe racer. And then obviously in Japan now, in Japan you've got the high fence people who are taking their styling cues from classic American racers and then applying them to their cars, which is kind of another take on that whole cafe racer / race car thing. And I think that'll be influential as well. I mean, I've never wanted a Porsche 914 more than when I saw the high fence 914. So yeah, that's my tips for you, Seth. Although obviously for everyone listening, the only thing that is really going to dominate next year will be hot rod inspired Morris Oxfords. So if you know anyone with one that could probably get it on the road for next year, then you should probably tell them to get it finished. Optimus Prime, of all the threads on here in the various sub-forums, what is the one thread poster you always look for first and why? Event reports. I love them. I love to see what's going on. I love to see what people are doing. I love to see what people pick out and why. So I'm more than happy with thread reports that are just a load of pictures. I don't need a big, long, detailed Lucky 7 style commentary on them. However, if that is there, then that is awesome because I then get to know why you picked those pictures. I had an interesting experience doing the Instagram. So my lovely lady wife took on the Retro Rides Gathering Instagram as a thing to do, and I would send her a picture and she'd ask me why I'd sent her that picture explicitly to put on so that she knew what to type underneath it. I was like, oh, it's just a cool car. She's like, well, that's kind of not good enough bit of text. Why did you take this picture? And that got me thinking, when I go to shows now, when I take photos, why am I taking a picture of this car? So that in my brain, I was like, all right, I can send that to my wife and she can stick that online. And that'll be the text underneath it. And then I noticed that when I go through events now and pick out pictures, I do the same thing. It's like, why am I picking out this picture? So I'm more than happy with threads of just pictures, the stuff that Jack puts up where he goes to Snetterton, goes to an awesome meet, puts up a bunch of awesome pictures. Brilliant, love it. I also love the Lucky 7 stuff and the stuff that's been inspired by his kind of commentary stuff about it, because I then get to know a bit more about why that was picked out and why that interested the person that was posting it and a little bit of the story of the event. So event stuff, really, from both angles there. Was the one poster I look forward to? Probably Armad still. If he's taken the time to post something up, it's generally going to be pretty cool. I think he's still a good barometer of what's awesome in and around the retro ride scene. I know he doesn't get to post as much as he used to. Controversial though he occasionally is, I'm a big fan of S20, which is Alan, because if it's a good post, it's going to be exceptional because he knows his stuff so well. Occasionally, it's just him demanding more facts from people that may not necessarily have those facts, which then can get a bit aggro. So maybe both sides of that. But I love Alan's informative posts because he knows his stuff. And actually, I've met and lunched with Alan, and he's a lovely chap. So he does like his facts. Like a certain other member of our forum, they do like their facts. Whose skills are you most jealous of on here, and what skills would you really like to master? All of them. I'm jealous of anyone that can do anything on cars. If anyone's ever seen me flailing around working on my car, they will understand that I don't know what I'm doing. But I keep trying. I keep having a go. Particularly now I've got a garage, and I keep plugging away at these things. Definitely metalwork though. Metalwork and paint. I think pretty much everybody would like to be able to do metalwork and paint. Tony BMW's metalwork is ridiculous. And then someone like Cole from Custom Colours, be able to paint your car. Not just the cost saving, but the freedom that gives you to play around with it. I think that yeah, those were the two things that I'd really like. I don't think I'm going to get the chance to master those two things because my garage is pretty cool, but I haven't got all of the equipment or all of the space. Ratchart, what are your favourite car events aside from the Gathering, obviously, and why? Sometimes I don't even think the Gathering's my favourite car event. It's the car event that I would like to go to, but for me, it's usually a lot of hard work, and sometimes I don't enjoy it, but I try and enjoy it as much as I can. But as it's got bigger, it's interesting that there was there's a middle period where it was just the right size versus quality ratio. So when it was smaller, it wasn't quite what I wanted. It wasn't quite there, but we didn't have the money to spend because we knew we weren't getting the attendance and stuff like that. And then it's got bigger, and it's a great show, and it's the show I would like to go to. But from an organising point of view, it's tipped over a little bit into being more work to organise than I would like. So I'm trying to mitigate that this year so I can start enjoying it again. Sorry, that was an aside because whilst Retro Rise Gathering is the best show of the year, obviously, it's not necessarily the one I enjoy the most. I'm gonna say my favourite car event is SEMA. Hate to say it because it sounds like the sort of thing that people that go to SEMA say, but it's ridiculous. It's just, I said in the thread, it's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever been to. I'm just actually this afternoon was planning California trip and Vegas trip to go to SEMA in 2016, so hopefully be back there this year. For the UK ones, the Goodwood members meeting was a real surprise. I was recently speaking to the chaps at Goodwood about it, and they are planning it to be a proper formal members meeting in the next couple of years. So they're building up its reputation, opening up the tickets to the public in January. In fact, they opened up today, and I just bought my tickets. And then I think either next year or the year after, from what they were saying, that the plan is to then make it so you have to have Goodwood membership to be able to go. So then that's an incentive to have Goodwood membership. So that's interesting to me that they're going to turn it into a proper members meeting. But if you can go now. It's just the right size. They're going to limit attendance as well. That was their whole thing, was that they wanted to keep it small, which is why they'll eventually shut up the public entry to it. But yeah, it's a really great weekend or great day. Thoroughly recommend that. Other events, I like most of them. I've been to very few bad events, and even if you go to a bad event, you take your chances. Sometimes I've been to a couple of events that aren't massively far away, and whilst I've been there, I've wandered around, I've taken half a dozen pictures and left, just because there was nothing to look at. But then that's kind of the chance you take. It wasn't the end of the world. Okay, Keithy boy, if you had time, money and skills, what engine would you put in what car? I would take a BMW 2002, and I would take a race-tuned engine from a Chevron B8 or some similar such thing that uses the engine block, and stick it in the BMW 2002. I like ridiculous race engines in road cars, even if they are borderline undrivable, because I just think it's stupid and it's brilliant at the same time. I keep on seeing Spice Formula 3 VW engines floating around on various race car parts websites, and I keep thinking that would look good in a Mark II Golf. It would be virtually undrivable and probably not even as quick as finding another tuning method for it, but at the end of the day, you've got a Formula 3 engine in your car. That's so stupid, it's wonderful. So yeah, that would be my thing. Bastard Child would like to know what I think the reasons for the growth over the last 10 years are. It's just because I'm amazing, really. I think people just flock to my magnetic personality. That's why it's grown so much. I think we stayed true to ourselves, probably. It could have been, the forum could be much bigger. Sometimes I don't think people necessarily realise this. If I wanted to make a much bigger forum, I could. A general section that's about anything for a start, because people come back for arguments. It's one of the stickiest things on all websites, is people having an argument. Even on the forum, we try to keep arguments to a minimum. Discussion is fine, but arguments are not good. But when we have like proper all-out blazing arguments that occur occasionally, traffic spikes. They're brilliant. They're brilliant for traffic, but that's kind of not the point. I think the growth has happened in spite of the fact that we stuck to our guns, but also because of the fact we stuck to our guns. We are what we are. We have our little niche. We work the way we work, which is a little eccentric. Those that like it stick around, and those that don't go. And that's not a bad thing. Like, it's not a bad thing if you don't like the forum or the way it's run, or me, all of which are kind of weirdly intrinsically linked. I wouldn't expect everybody to, and it's certainly not a problem for me if people don't. I think that people want different things from forums depending on what sort of forum it is, and we clearly provide something that people like. So we kept providing it, and here we are. We're kind of a big deal. We're not really that big though. We're not like VW Vortex or Piston Heads or something like that. We're not a massive forum, but for our little niche, I guess we're quite well known. What we got? A Cord 83. Mug of tea or coffee in the workshop. Green tea, always green tea. Bacon butty or pork pie, probably neither. Cheese sandwiches, I like them. 8 or 12-point sockets, both, all of them. Every socket. I have so many socket sets, and I was finding out recently when I was working in the garage with James Hill, who is Blown Imp on the forum, that none of my socket sets have matching ratchet handle type things, technicals, because I've bought a load over time, because every time I thought, I need a socket set, I've bought one and then gone to the workshop and found that I already have one. I've done that about 5 times, and the handles seem to go missing or end up in the wrong toolboxes and things. So I still have a job of sorting all that out. I was hoping to do it over Christmas, but as these things go, it did not happen. And Kill Bill, let's have a look at time we got. We've got time for more questions. Kill Bill wants to know, is it true all Volvo and Saab drivers are doctors and drive in slippers? Well, Kill Bill, I've got a bit of bad news for you. I drive a Volvo, a C30, as my daily driver, and I'm not a doctor. And I think my dad wants to get a Saab, and he is not a doctor. So that is a lie. But all Volvo and Saab drivers are awesome, if that's any help. So what else we got? SB. Also, a question for you. You wake up in sort of Mad Max-esque wasteland. What vehicle do you choose, and what do you do to it? Ooh, that's interesting. I think a Paris-Dakar. See, I was going to say truck, but I was looking at Paris-Dakar cars the other day, and I noticed that they had a Mercedes 500 SL running it. So I'm going to say a Paris-Dakar Mercedes 500 SL. And what do I do with it? I probably arm it to the teeth and fill it up with fuel and do whatever the hell I want, because I'm driving Mercedes, goddammit. Spartacus wants to know why his wife is always telling him he needs to learn to communicate. Yeah, I'm supposed to guess what she wants. I'm not a married counsellor, but I just go talk to her, as Wayne's World would tell you. Lucky7 wants to know what actually is a podcast. This is a podcast. Good times. Mad Max, what's your best tip for freeing a seriously seized by storage and moisture engine? Now, not being a technical chap, I can't give you a technical answer on this, but I can tell you what my thoughts would be. And my thoughts would be, I would free up a seriously seized engine by sticking it in the bin and swapping a new engine in. But that's not just a flippant comment, because anytime anything breaks on your car, anything, that's when you get to upgrade it. So if you've got a seized engine, stick a new engine in. Your brake pads need replacing? No, your brake pads don't need replacing. You need to put 4-pot calipers on your car. That's what you need to do. Oh, lock's got a bit of a problem. You need to de-lock and shave the car doors. That's what you need to do. So take any error, broken part of your car as an opportunity to upgrade and customise. So there's my tip. And it's just a tip. George B. How do you see the gathering developing over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's about right as it is and resist temptation to expand, let it grow naturally and see where it goes, or is there a definite direction you'd like to take it? It's an interesting one, the growth of the Gathering. In fact, I should probably do an entire podcast about the Gathering at some point with Keith. Although that is troublesome because he's in New Zealand and the time lag on Skype is shocking. But we can work that out. For the next 5 to 10 years, goodness, I barely know what I'm doing year after next. So this year I've got a good lineup of cars sorted. We want to dress up the paddock. I'm going to limit the show field, so it's literally the two. If you've been to the event, you'll know this, that there's kind of two fields and then like a further field that goes up. That's where we put the retro parking. And this year the club cars went all the way into that as well. So I'm going to limit it back further to probably about 1,000 cars, if not a little bit less, in the club area. And then the retro parking is the retro parking. And that way the show field's a little bit more manageable inside, both for us and people attending the event. We're going to dress up the paddock a bit nicer, or put some more stuff in the paddock. We've got some better ideas of where to put traders now that we've got those back. I'm currently, and I'm saying this now as not a promise, currently looking at something special for next year, because it'll be the 10th year that Retro Rides as an entity have had an event. It's not the 10th year of the Gathering, but it's the 10th year of Retro Rides doing events. And then where we go beyond that, I don't know. I keep on wanting to do more shows, but I have a day job and more hobbies than you even want to think about. And I don't get to indulge many of them as much as I'd like. So, in fact, I have kind of 2 day jobs, and the potential for a third. So I kind of end up, in my brain, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And then the reality of it hits, and I'm like, no, we can't do more events. So I would like to do more events. That's where I see the Gathering developing. Mr. Speedy would like to go back to Prescott. Well, I'd like to do another event there. Genuinely, we ran out of space. I don't know how many times I have to tell people this. We ran out of space. We had other problems with locals. Which, to be honest, we'd have kind of anywhere we go, really. So that didn't help, but I was already thinking maybe doing one more year at Prescott and then moving on, because there was no way I was going to be able to fit another year at Prescott in. But it would perhaps even been better for us to do that and everyone to go, oh my God, this venue's too small, you should move it, rather than us to preempt the move, because then I wouldn't have to field the damn question about why we moved all the time. And then the problems with the locals and Prescott themselves actually started to run. The Bugatti Owners Club wanted their venue back, effectively, to run more of their own weekends. They've only recently started putting other events back on. But I'd like to go back there. They have a noise limit there now, which they didn't when we ran events there. But I'd like to do a second event there, not the Gathering, because the Gathering's too big, but something else there. What will this forum become in 5 years, and how are you going to take it there? That's from Overdrive. I think forums are interesting, and perhaps again this is another podcast to have with maybe another couple of car communities. To be honest, the social networks were supposed to, or were always the death knell of, well, everything really. Magazines, forums, bulletin boards, emails, everything was going to go social network. It hasn't. Like, email exists. Newsletters have become like the big thing again now. If you notice, you go on most websites, there's a thing to subscribe to a newsletter, because people found people engage with newsletters a lot more than they do with social media. Social media is such a light touch. So I still see forums being around in 5 years. I suspect there'll be a stronger a stronger pitch for forums. There'll be more of an understanding of why they exist and what they offer than there is at the moment. That there's the community you get in forums is much stronger, much tighter, much better informed than the communities you get on social media. And social media itself is, because it's such a light touch, it can dissipate quite quickly as well. So it doesn't have that kind of deep archive of stuff. I mean, you can find that stuff, like you can find the car photos from the show from 3 years ago, but it's easier to do that on forums. It used to be easier to do that on Flickr, but they've messed that up. So I think that there's certainly that, and the depth of information you get on forums is kind of untouchable as well. That social media of all types is made for a very thin veneer of communication, and that's why it's so sticky and why it's so constant. Whereas I find forums are much deeper communication. It's part of the reason I turned off the likes thing, because that sort of communication isn't what forums are good at. But I turned it back on because people like the affirmation of people being interested in their stuff. I notice it still isn't used very much, but that is what it is. I think forums shouldn't ape social media because they're two distinct things. So I'm going to take it there by being really good at what I do, which is building websites and understanding community-based technology. That's what I'm going to do, and also talking to Patrick at ProBoards, because he's got some good ideas about where we're going to go in the future of forums. I might point out that whilst I run Retro Rides as sort of the forum, at least as a hobby, the gathering's closer to a job, but the forum's still my hobby, my part-time stuff. I actually build social networks and community platforms for a living. Which is why I say I'm really good and I understand the thing, because someone pays me the big bucks to do it. I try and get as much as I can into Retro Rides of my learnings from that, but I don't always have the time, which is a bit of a shame, because there's so much more I'd like to do with the forum, both from a tech point of view and from a community structure point of view. But these are the breaks. If someone wants to pay me thousands of pounds, I'll do this full time. Foxy wants to know why I hate him. I don't hate Foxy. I like Foxy. Although I don't like people that drink far too much and then sleep or go home hangover without having actually gone to the show that I put a lot of effort to put on, which is also Foxy. So Foxy, buck up your ideas. Little Eddie has a range of questions. How deep would the ocean be if sponges didn't live there? Probably deeper. Where do flies go when it rains? They hide. What shape would chairs be if our knees were on backwards? They'd be the other way around. And what's the hardest job you've ever done on your car? All of them. All jobs on cars are hard for me, because I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gradually learning. And I think everyone should take that as encouragement to gradually learn yourself. HumDK. When is a car retro? God, I'm not answering that question. I'm going to wait until I do a podcast with Armad, which will be our kind of more regular podcasts. To answer that question. But what makes them so interesting? I don't know. But I found a very interesting thing. As some cars got older that I dismissed when I was growing up, I now look at them in a new light and think, oh, that's pretty cool. And I don't know if that just says something about my brain and the way I process aesthetics. So maybe other people pick up on that earlier, which is why they like new cars. And then there's some of us that pick up on that later, which is why we like old cars. Let's make this... Oh, we've got 3 questions left. Okay, let's overrun a bit. What is a true cut-off point for the number of cars you own? 3. You own 3 cars. You own your project, you own your daily driver, and you own your show car / race car, or 4 if you have a show car and a race car and a project and a daily. So let's dismiss the daily from the equation, because everyone needs a daily driver. You can run your retro as your daily if you want, so you could actually have 2. But project, finished car, race car, daily. And I think that when your project is finished, you then work out what you're doing. Do you daily that project now is finished? Is that your new race car? Is that your new show car? The reason I say this, because I've found the amount of people on the forum that own 8 cars, like Sutty 2006, who asked the question, have a load of cars, they have no money, they have no time, and none of them work. And they're all projects, and it's really hard to concentrate on a number of projects at once, particularly if you have no money as a result of having so many cars. On the flip side, it's great to have people that are enthusiastic enough about cars to have a bunch of them. But what you don't want to be is that guy whose field you see on the internet that's full of cars that have moulded into the ground. Because at one point he bought all of those, or she bought all of those, for the reason that they liked them. And now they're beyond repair because they didn't have the time, they didn't have the money to do them. So unless you're in a situation where you've got a good amount of dry storage and a reasonable amount of money and a reasonable amount of time, I would try to stick to having 3 cars or less. Personally, it's definitely worked for me. That I've now, at one point I had 4 cars and 3 of them didn't work, and all of them needed to work on a Monday morning for various reasons, and it was just hellish. Whereas now I have the Datsun, which is a project car, which is nearly finished. But when it wasn't finished, it didn't matter that it didn't work on Monday morning, because I had my daily driver to get me to work. And sure, I didn't have anything interesting to take to shows, but once it's finished, I've got something to take to shows. So now I take that to shows, but I'll get another car as a project then, because that project is done. And maybe I'll swap between those two, but all of the time I will not have so many cars that I can't concentrate on them. So that kind of worries me sometimes when I see people with 98 different cars, and they always end up having a crisis at some point and either getting rid of a bunch of them or having to spend a small fortune to get all the work done. Sinky, if you weren't an administrator, what would you be? I would be a user of this forum. I think it's great. The problem is I can't just have a hobby. I am one of those people that always gets deeply involved in everything I do. I love board games, so naturally I design board games in my spare time. I just can't have anything that's just a hobby. I like music, but in just the most extreme way. I'm not just like, I'll buy an album every month. It's ridiculous the amount of music I listen to, and kind of how involved I get with it. But yeah, I'd be, if I wasn't an administrator, I'd be using this forum. I'd be probably one of those annoying top poster people that was always posting up new threads. And El Woody finally would like to thank me for bringing back the like button. I'm semi-happy it's back. I wish people would use it more. It's a nice bit of affirmation that you like the thread. One of the things I really want to do this year is get a new design on the forum, which is based on the old design, but just get the interactions a bit slicker and a bit nicer. But I was told to hold off on that because Pro Boards have got a whole new templating thing coming in, which I was slated for February, so we'll see whether or not that turns up on time. But I'm looking forward to that because it means I can do some design stuff on the forum I've been wanting to for a long time. So there we are. That's the first one of these recorded. Runs over time a little bit, but what do you expect? I'm still learning. Next time will be me and Ahmad talking about stuff. I'll probably do it mainly as an interview of him, so we're both introduced. The plan is at the moment, every other podcast will be me and Ahmad talking about stuff that's on the forum and retro stuff in general. I don't know, shows, just shooting the breeze. And then in between those will be interviews with people, which may just be me interviewing people, or maybe both of us interviewing people, or maybe and another third party and me interviewing someone, just talking about their interesting cars and their specialities and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is us. Thank you for your time. As you can tell, I really don't know how to end a podcast.